They say Earth is mapped, measured, and mastered. Satellites orbit above. Submarines crawl below. And yet, one theory, long dismissed and often mocked, still refuses to die. The hollow Earth theory. Once confined to fringe science and science fiction, it has lingered in the background of polar exploration, wartime secrecy, and satellite anomalies. A myth to most, but to some, a puzzle missing only a few final pieces. This isn't a story about belief. It's about why, after centuries of progress, this theory continues to draw attention. From Arctic vanishing points to redacted government records, from Admiral Byrd's polar flights to digital blind spots, in the age of high-resolution mapping, the hollow Earth story keeps resurfacing. Not because it's probable, but because some questions still don't have answers. Long before satellites, before airplanes, before polar ice was anything more than myth, people imagined what lay beyond the edges of the known world. And beneath it, the hollow Earth theory, as we know it today, began in the 1700s, an era when science was just starting to pry open the secrets of the planet. It was Edmund Halley, the same Halley whose name graces the famous comet, who first proposed a radical idea that Earth might be made of concentric shells, one inside the other, each possibly hosting its own magnetic field. To him, this might explain odd compass readings and auroral lights. His theory was speculative, yes, but it wasn't a fantasy. It was an early attempt to explain unknowns using the tools of reason available at the time. Then, in the early 1800s, came John Clevey Sims, an American Army officer who took the idea in a different direction. He claimed Earth had massive openings at the poles, literal holes you could sail into, and that a whole other world existed inside, bathed in light. He even petitioned Congress for funding to explore the Arctic. He never got it. But his theory, dubbed Sims' Hole, sparked public fascination. Pamphlets were printed. Lectures were given. The idea of a hollow Earth wasn't just scientific, it was cultural. In an age of blank spaces on maps, it made sense to imagine what might be hidden beneath. What's crucial to understand is these early thinkers weren't pushing myths. They were trying to reason their way into a world still full of unknowns. That's what makes the theory so enduring. It didn't begin with fiction. It began with questions. By the early 20th century, Earth's great blank spaces were beginning to shrink. The interiors of continents had been mapped. Oceans had been crossed. Mountains climbed. But the poles north and south remained elusive, dangerous, and above all unexplored. That changed with Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd. A decorated naval officer, pilot, and engineer, Byrd was one of the last great explorers of the modern age. In 1926, he claimed to have flown over the North Pole, a feat later debated by historians. Then, in 1929, he became the first person to fly over the South Pole. His missions didn't stop there. Byrd would return to Antarctica several times over the next 3 decades, leading expeditions involving ships, planes, scientific teams, and millions in government funding. To the public, he was a hero, a symbol of progress, of American ingenuity pushing into the final frontiers of the Earth. But it's what happened during and after those missions that would fuel one of the most persistent legends in hollow Earth lore. In 1947, Byrd led Operation High Jump, a massive U.S. Navy mission to Antarctica involving over 4,000 personnel, 13 ships, and dozens of aircraft. Officially, the goal was to test military readiness in extreme conditions and to conduct scientific research. Unofficially, speculation exploded. Why such a massive military presence? Why the urgency? Theories bloomed. Some believe the operation was a covert reconnaissance mission to investigate possible Nazi bases, remnants of a rumored escape to the Antarctic following World War II. Others suggested something stranger, that Byrd's true mission was to locate an entrance to the inner Earth. That idea found fuel in a mysterious document, what's often called Byrd's secret diary. The diary, which surfaced decades later under unclear circumstances, describes a flight over the Arctic where Byrd allegedly encountered a lush green land beyond the ice. Inside, he wrote of seeing animals long thought extinct, including mammoths, and of meeting beings who spoke to him telepathically, warning of mankind's path of destruction. It's a stunning account, fantastical, surreal, and deeply at odds with his official logs. But here's the crucial point. There is no verifiable evidence that Byrd actually wrote that diary. It appears to have been penned or fabricated long after his death, with details that conflict with documented timelines of his missions. Byrd's known writings, speeches, and logs make no mention of such encounters. He was a committed man of science and military order. He believed in exploration, not myth. Still, the diary was enough to ignite a fire in the Hollow Earth community. Compounding the mystery were fragments of truth. Byrd did speak to reporters in the late 1940s about the dangers of Antarctica. In one interview, he warned of a threat from enemy aircraft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds, a quote often cited, but rarely sourced with full context. And some of his mission data, especially from Operation High Jump, would not immediately release to the public. Portions of his reports were classified and only became available through later declassification efforts. Even so, what was made public did not suggest contact with any hidden civilizations, nor did it support the more extravagant claims made in his name. But the damage, or the myth, had already taken hold. By the 1950s, Hollow Earth proponents were citing Byrd as a key witness, whether or not he ever intended to be. His expeditions had proven one thing, that the poles were still wild, still unpredictable, and still deeply inaccessible. And where mystery persists, theories multiply. In the final years before World War II, the Nazi regime turned its gaze toward the most remote and inhospitable region on Earth, Antarctica. In 1938, Germany launched an expedition known as the Neuschwabenland Mission, named after a region in East Germany. Officially, it was presented as a whaling and mapping expedition. 2 seaplanes, a catapult ship, and a crew of scientists and sailors made the journey. They surveyed a portion of Queen Maud Land, dropped aluminum darts with swastika insignias to claim territory, and took extensive aerial photographs. But this seemingly mundane operation would, decades later, become the root of one of the most enduring conspiracy theories in modern history, that the Nazis established a secret base in Antarctica, a hidden stronghold either within a vast underground network or, in some versions, inside the Earth itself. The theory hinges on more than just the presence of the Germans in the South. It draws on threads of known fact, political mysticism, and Cold War-era paranoia. To understand it, we need to look beyond Antarctica and into the ideological undercurrents of the Third Reich. The Nazi regime harbored an unusual fascination with the occult. High-ranking officials, including Heinrich Himmler, were involved with the Ahnenerbe, a pseudo-archaeological institute tasked with uncovering evidence of ancient Aryan dominance. Expeditions were sent to Tibet, the Middle East, and beyond, looking for mythic origins and esoteric knowledge. Among the stranger ideas circulating in these circles was the Hollow Earth theory, or more precisely, a variation called the Hohlweltel, which posited that we live on the inside of a hollow sphere and the stars and sun hang in its center. This idea, while never part of mainstream Nazi doctrine, was promoted by fringe thinkers with ties to the regime. So when rumors of secret Antarctic bases began to spread in the years after the war, the ideological groundwork was already laid. The legend of Base 211, or Station 211, began to take shape. According to the theory, high-ranking Nazis, including SS scientists and engineers, fled Germany as the war neared its end. Using advanced U-boat technology, they traveled to a hidden region beneath the Antarctic ice, possibly a cave system revealed by underwater thermal vents or a pre-existing structure carved by unknown forces. There, the story goes, they established a self-sufficient base, continued their experiments, and possibly encountered or aligned with entities far older than human civilization. Some versions claim these entities were extraterrestrial. Others describe them as remnants of an ancient terrestrial race. What evidence exists for any of this? The short answer, not much. Most of the claims come from secondhand sources, Cold War-era whistleblowers, discredited authors, or theories emerging decades after the fact. No verified documents have ever confirmed the existence of Base 211. The official records of the 1938 expedition describe no underground facilities. No U-boats were definitively traced to the region after the war. And yet, the story refuses to fade. One reason is timing. Operation High Jump, led by Admiral Byrd, took place just a year after the war's end. The sheer scale of the mission, 4,000 men, a fleet of ships, and rapid withdrawal after just a few weeks, seemed suspicious to some. Why was a peacetime expedition conducted under military leadership? What, if anything, did they find? Soviet intelligence, deeply mistrustful of American actions during the early Cold War, reportedly believed the U.S. was searching for or attacking a secret Nazi outpost. In later decades, television specials, pseudo-documentaries, and online forums began to tie it all together. Nazi technology like the rumored Die Glock, the Bell, was said to have been tested in these secret locations. Diagrams of circular aircraft, predecessors to flying saucers, were linked to escape plans and reverse-engineered craft. It's a mix of fact, fiction, and inference. But even the skeptics agree. Antarctica is one of the last places on Earth where secrets might still hide. Its harsh climate, international treaties, and remote geography make it nearly impossible to explore freely. For conspiracy theorists, that's all the proof they need. It's easy to forget, in the age of GPS and satellite imaging, just how much of our planet remains perilous. The polar regions, vast, empty, and hostile, are not just hard to reach. They are hard to survive, and they have a history of taking things. Expeditions, aircraft, entire ships. Long before theories of secret bases or inner-Earth civilizations gained traction, the Arctic and Antarctic were associated with disappearance and death. One of the earliest and most infamous cases was the Franklin expedition. In 1845, Sir John Franklin led two British ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, into the Arctic to map and navigate the Northwest Passage. The expedition was well-funded, modern for its time, and expected to succeed. It vanished. Search parties found scattered remains over the next 2 decades. A boat hauled across the ice, human bones, notes left in stone cairns. The ships themselves were not found until over a century later. What happened remains partially unknown. Starvation, lead poisoning from canned food, and exposure likely played roles. But some details, like evidence of cannibalism and contradictory path markers, have never been fully explained. Decades later, in the early Cold War period, aircraft began to vanish in polar regions under more modern circumstances. In 1950, a U.S. Air Force C-54 disappeared while flying from Alaska to Montana, last radio contact near the Yukon. No trace was ever found. In 1955, a Navy P-2V Neptune vanished over the Arctic. Again, no wreckage. Some incidents were explained later. Others were not. The climate is part of the answer. Whiteout conditions can appear with little warning. Magnetic anomalies near the poles can disrupt compasses and instruments. Crashes can be buried within hours by snow, rendered invisible to search planes. But it's not just the disappearances themselves, it's the pattern. Across the 20th century, dozens of aircraft incidents occurred within a certain polar corridor. Flights deviating from course, sudden radio silence, emergency landings with confused or disoriented crews. Military logs often remain classified for decades. And this is where theory enters. Proponents of the hollow Earth idea began to see a pattern. Could some of these incidents represent accidental encounters, glimpses of entrances, anomalies, or other phenomena hidden beneath the ice? Some versions draw from pilot reports, sudden fog that disrupts instruments, visual distortions in the sky, dramatic shifts in temperature within minutes. Others point to magnetic deviations mapped near the poles, localized distortions in the Earth's field not fully explained by geology alone. One often cited case occurred in 1965 when a U.S. Navy plane vanished near the South Pole with 6 men aboard. The official cause was listed as a storm-induced crash, but later reports described interference with communications and navigation in the hours prior. Again, no conclusive link to any larger mystery, but no definitive explanation either. The Antarctic in particular has always been off-limits in subtle ways. Treaties signed in the late 1950s restricted military activity and banned territorial claims. Scientific research is allowed, but heavily regulated. Large sections remain unexplored by ground. So when aircraft disappear or signal loss occurs, it's not hard for the imagination to fill the gap, especially when official answers are slow, redacted, or withheld entirely. We live in the age of high resolution, satellites orbiting constantly, scanning Earth with extraordinary precision. Remote sensors measure topography to the meter. Weather, movement, temperature, all recorded, logged, analyzed. But even now, some parts of the planet remain strangely underseen, especially near the poles. Modern satellite imaging does not perfectly cover the Arctic or Antarctic regions. Google Earth, for example, has long shown low-resolution patches near both poles. These aren't always permanent. Some update, some vanish, some remain. And to those who look for patterns, these gaps are more than technological limitations. They're seen as signs. Why, in an era of precision mapping, do certain areas still appear blurred or stitched oddly together? Why are polar regions still so underrepresented in public satellite datasets? The reasons are largely technical, and they make sense to scientists. For one, satellite orbits are usually optimized for coverage over inhabited regions, where commercial and environmental data are more valuable. Polar orbits exist, but fewer satellites use them. And those that do often gather data not designed for public visualization. Secondly, imaging polar regions is inherently difficult. Low-angle sunlight, extreme weather, and reflective ice confuse visual sensors. Clouds linger longer. Shadows stretch further. Even when images are collected, stitching them into coherent global maps is a challenge. But here's where the conversation turns. Because even acknowledging those facts, the persistence of distortions, gaps, or missing timestamp data around polar areas feels conspicuous, especially to those already inclined towards suspicion. There have been documented cases of satellite images being altered, not necessarily for secrecy, but for practical or political reasons. Sensitive military installations, for instance, are sometimes blurred or obscured. That precedent fuels the idea. If some things are hidden, what else might be? One widely circulated example involves a circular anomaly spotted on Google Earth near the Antarctic coast, a near-perfect ring of disturbed snow several hundred meters wide. Interpretations varied. Some saw a natural collapse of ice. Others proposed the entrance to a large underground structure. The image existed for several years before being quietly replaced in later updates. Google provided no comment. No official explanation was offered. Elsewhere, researchers have pointed to magnetic maps of Earth that show unusual fluctuations in polar areas. The South Atlantic anomaly, though not near the poles, is often included in these discussions due to its unexplained magnetic weakening. It's used as an example of how planetary systems are still only partially understood. And then there's the simple fact of omission. The public has access to detailed maps of Mars and the Moon, yet some glacial regions on our own planet remain coarse, patchy, or blurred. It may be innocent. It may be technological. But it's also undeniably strange. And in the realm of the hollow Earth theory, strangeness is fuel. To believers, these blind spots are not accidents. They are doors, not proof. But the absence of proof, which, in the right light, becomes more suggestive than evidence itself. By now, the hollow Earth theory lives more in the realm of cultural persistence than scientific debate. But its survival and resurgence raises a deeper question. What do we do with mysteries that refuse to die? Mainstream science has long moved past the idea of a hollow planet. Seismology, conducted through decades of earthquake wave studies, paints a clear picture. Earth has a solid inner core, a molten outer core, a viscous mantle, and a brittle crust. We've mapped it not through direct access, but through mathematics, wave patterns, and inference. And yet, a paradox remains. The deepest humans have ever drilled into Earth is just over 7 miles, the Kolos super-deep borehole in Russia. That's barely scratching the surface. We've never seen the mantle. We've never touched the core. Most of what we know comes from indirect measurement. Models, algorithms, simulations. They're reliable, but they aren't visceral. This is where myth re-enters the frame. The hollow Earth story, in all its variants, does something science rarely does. It gives people a vision of the unknown that feels inhabitable. It offers structure to mystery, a world inside a world, a reason for secrecy, a hidden history just beneath our feet. It's not unique to modern times. Cultures around the globe have echoed similar motifs for centuries. The Hopi speak of the ant people, who live underground and help their ancestors survive cataclysms. Ancient Tibetan texts describe Agartha, a subterranean realm of enlightened beings. Norse cosmology includes Svartalfheimr, the land of hidden people below the surface. None of these stories suggest a literal hollow Earth, but they share something else, the belief that below holds meaning. That descent, into caves, into the Earth, into the unknown, is a path toward revelation. And that matters. Because even when a theory fails the test of science, it may still survive the test of imagination. Especially when modern life feels increasingly mapped, exposed, and surveilled. In the age of total information, the hollow Earth offers something rare, an unfinished sentence. And some argue that's healthy. The persistence of unprovable ideas, even implausible ones, reflects a kind of intellectual pressure valve. It reminds us that science is a method, not an end. That knowledge evolves, and that certainty is often temporary. We laugh at the idea of a hollow planet, and rightly so, the evidence just isn't there. But in that laughter hides a discomfort. Because if there's one thing science and myth agree on, it's this: the more we learn, the more we realize we don't know. The poles remain harsh, inaccessible, and dangerous. The deep Earth remains physically out of reach. And those satellites sweep overhead. What they miss, what they don't show, can still make room for stories. In the last few decades, scientific missions to the polar regions have achieved extraordinary breakthroughs. Ice cores have revealed the climate history of Earth going back hundreds of thousands of years. Drones and satellites have mapped surface features with increasing precision. Autonomous underwater vehicles have explored beneath floating shelves. And yet, the deeper we go, the more anomalies we find. In 1996, Russian scientists drilling at Vostok Station in East Antarctica discovered something remarkable: a massive freshwater lake buried beneath more than 2 miles of ice. Lake Vostok, isolated from the surface for possibly millions of years, the lake remains a biological mystery. Microbes retrieved from samples raise questions. Were they contaminants? Or signs of life adapted to extreme isolation? Years later, NASA and other institutions began studying these subglacial environments as analogs for icy moons like Europa. The same logic applied. If life can exist under Antarctic ice, it might exist beneath alien crust as well. But here's where things turn strange again. Access to Lake Vostok has been controversial. The Russian team's original drilling was halted due to contamination concerns. Subsequent missions resumed, but with heavy oversight and limited transparency. Critics pointed to geopolitical tensions, uneven data sharing, and the secrecy surrounding certain findings. The result? Another information gap. In the absence of clarity, theories filled the void. Was something found beneath the ice that wasn't published? Could the lake be part of a deeper tunnel system or linked to geothermal cavities housing unknown structures? Geophysicists, meanwhile, continued to document anomalies beneath the Antarctic surface, places where radar showed voids, unusually warm rock, or gravitational irregularities. In 2018, NASA's GRAY satellites detected a mass loss in the West Antarctic ice sheet inconsistent with known glacial activity. Theories ranged from new meltwater systems to underground volcanic activity, and again, speculation leapt ahead of the science. At the magnetic level, Antarctica also displays oddities. The South Pole's magnetic field has not remained stable over time. It has drifted significantly, a phenomenon explained by fluid dynamics in the Earth's core, but not entirely understood. Further north, the Arctic also holds mysteries. There are gravity anomalies, such as the Hudson Bay region, that defy expectations, not because they're supernatural, but because they indicate processes beneath the surface we still don't fully model. In short, modern research hasn't closed the case. It's opened new ones. And the deeper question remains: why are some findings shared openly and others obscured? Why do some missions receive global attention, while others, including those with strange or unclear results, fade quickly from view? Again, we don't need to assume conspiracy to notice the gaps. What the Hollow Earth theory represents here is less about belief in tunnels or hidden civilizations, and more about the human response to incomplete information. The poles are among the least understood regions on Earth. Not because we haven't looked, but because what we found only hints at what's still missing. If the Hollow Earth theory has survived scientific dismissal, it's because of something older and deeper than science: secrecy. From the Cold War to the digital age, the idea that information is withheld, not due to ignorance, but intent, has become central to how people interpret the unexplained. And few regions have inspired more suspicion than the poles. In the late 1940s and 50s, as world powers scrambled for strategic advantage, secrecy became policy. Military research was classified. Satellite data was limited. Whole areas of Antarctica were suddenly subject to international agreements that restricted access and activity. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 and entered into force in 1961, declared the continent a demilitarized zone for peaceful scientific cooperation. It banned military installations and prohibited nuclear testing. On paper, it was a triumph of diplomacy. But it also created a structure of control where only authorized parties could conduct research and only certain kinds of data were shared. Even today, most expeditions must be approved through complex permit systems. Remote areas remain off-limits or logistically unreachable. Add to that the legacy of declassified documents, redacted reports, delayed disclosures, unexplained projects, and you get a recipe for public doubt. In the United States, the Freedom of Information Act allowed access to once secret files. Many related to polar missions in the mid-20th century. Most were mundane, but some contained oddities, missing logs, unexplained aircraft redirections, mentions of non-standard magnetic behavior with no follow-up data. To a scientist, these are blips. To a theorist, they're breadcrumbs. And the digital era only intensified this. As platforms like YouTube, Reddit, and TikTok grew, they brought with them a new kind of storytelling, decentralized, visual, and fast. Users could pull satellite imagery, overlay maps, analyze shadows, and crowdsource anomalies. Hollow Earth didn't need academic support. It had virality. Videos analyzing polar holes on Google Earth drew millions of views. Threads connecting Lake Vostok, Nazi bases, and Admiral Byrd formed speculative webs. And perhaps most tellingly, the tone shifted. It wasn't just belief. It was distrust. Not in the Earth itself, but in the institutions claiming to explain it. The government, the military, big science, big tech. Each time an image was replaced, a report delayed, or a drone shot unavailable, it wasn't chalked up to chance. It was interpreted as concealment. And that suspicion is what drives modern Hollow Earth culture. It's not a matter of geology anymore. It's a matter of access. The theory has become a canvas onto which larger fears are projected, about information, control, and the shrinking space for independent discovery. People don't just want to know what's beneath the ice. They want to know why they're not allowed to find out. In the end, it doesn't require a literal inner Earth. It only requires one thing, that there's something we're not being told. The Hollow Earth theory was never supposed to last. It was born in a time of scientific infancy, a time when auroras were mysteries, the poles were blank spaces on maps, and drilling through Earth's crust was a fantasy. The model has since been dismantled by physics, by geology, by seismology. And yet, it endures. Not because the evidence supports it, but because, at its core, the Hollow Earth story speaks to something timeless, the fear that we haven't been told the whole truth, and the hope that something astonishing still lies undiscovered. It's not about believing in underground cities or secret civilizations. It's about questioning the idea that everything important has already been found, that all the doors are closed. That wonder has been replaced by data. The Earth's interior, in a literal sense, is not hollow, but it is largely unknown. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the mantle beneath our feet. We know the poles are melting, but not what lies miles beneath their frozen caps. Our maps are sharp, but our understanding remains layered and often thin. The Hollow Earth has become a metaphor, not just for hidden worlds, but for hidden truths. For the spaces where curiosity lingers long after evidence says no. It's easy to dismiss the theory. Science has, and rightly so. But what's harder to dismiss is why it keeps coming back. It returns in moments of doubt, in gaps between what we're told and what we can verify, in places, literal and cultural, that remain inaccessible. It survives because people still want to look down into the dark and wonder what's there. And maybe in a world where so much mystery has been flattened by exposure, that's not such a bad thing. Maybe Hollow Earth isn't about the Earth at all. Maybe it's about us and the unlit places we still carry.